Paul, we
Yes,
should
sir.
talk about something that will upset people, because I think that's pretty much what we do. And so, what do you think about Windows 8? Let's just toss that meatball across the plate.
You know, I've been trying to avoid that discussion.
Oh, gods, no, I love this. I love talking about Windows 8 because I was the only guy that liked Vista. And now I'm vindicated. Because first of all, Windows 7...
I was with you on Vista.
Really?
Yes. And I think that people
I felt that I stood alone.
unfairly maligned it.
You ask people their 20 favorite features about Windows 7 or Windows 8 or whatever, I guarantee you 15 of them appeared with Vista. Now, what's interesting is this will be the anti-Vista. Because Vista's problem was too much great new technology, too soon, and the driver issue and 64-bit. All those things. And it's the same thing that XP had, right? The whole problem was, no one remembers this, but on 26 October 2001, the day after XP released, people were like, oh my God, it runs like crap because I don't have the hardware for it, I don't have the drivers.
Yes.
But after
Selective
like,
memory is a
after like
beautiful
6 months, right? But the problem was Vista took so long that people forgot that this always happens with Windows, and so it got
XP was in the market for so long. Suddenly, this was the way it always was, and this thing is fantastic.
Exactly. You know, I mean, it looked like Windows 2000 with the Play School interface, but you know, still, it's a the Fisher Price version. So what happened with Vista was we had to wait for the hardware to catch up and the drivers to catch up. So Windows 7 is basically Vista.
Service Pack 3.
Actually, with a few things removed, because you know one of the things we saw in the rollout was like it uses less memory. The reason Windows 7 uses less memory is they built it to use less memory and thus actually be slower when it comes to process creation than Vista is. But anyway, so here we have Steven Sinofsky, who was the fellow who brought us Windows 7, did a great job from a marketing point of view. He essentially took Mojave.net and made it into a product, and for that, my hat's off to Mr. Sinofsky. The funny thing, though, is that Jim Olchin was the guy who got essentially ritually slaughtered for having had Vista come out late. Now, why Microsoft wants to ship Windows in time for Christmas, I will never get. I'm like, you have kids. Could you imagine, under the Christmas tree for your son Mark, oh, look, lad, it's a copy of Windows 8. Oh, Daddy, thank you so much. I've been wanting to upgrade, or perhaps a laptop.
I think it's more to do with the holiday selling season and also the back-to-school selling season for PCs, right? Because people typically get it with new computers. But yes,
the fact that it shipped in January. No, and the thing was, once they knew that they were going to not hit Christmas, they're like, we have to hit January for the Martin Luther King birthday PC sales, because that's the only holiday I could think of in January. So,
but Windows 8.
What's funny is, and I'm going to tread very carefully here because I like both of these people, but Jim Olchin's downfall became Sinofsky's rise. What's interesting now is that Sinofsky is bringing us a totally amazing, cool new Windows. From your and my point of view as operating system geeks,
I'm glad you're saying it this way, because this is
for us, we're like kids in a candy shop.
It's a giant fruit basket of fun.
Absolutely. We got UEFI BIOS support. We've got
and by the way, and just from like the sort of pundit standpoint, you either love it or you hate it. Excellent. Both of those are fine. In other words, from my standpoint, just as sort of looking at the industry, both of those are great. Because if you just feel like, oh no, this is a very competent release of Windows.
Oh no, nobody's going to think that.
And that's why Windows 8 is fun.
This is the DOS 4 release of
neat.
Of Windows. Exactly.
Right.
No, and I love the fact that they're hanging it out over the ragged edge. The bad news, and we've talked about this before, is that your mouse experience, if you are using Windows 8 with a mouse, and I know that you're not as opposed to it as I am, but I mean the fact that I had carpal tunnel almost 20 years ago, and having to put the mouse exactly on the outside pixel feels like I'm living in carpal tunnel, the valley of the carpal tunnel.
It depends, right? So I would say you're talking about the hot spots in the corners of the screens and so forth. If you're using a single screen, it's not bad because you can kind of jam it into the corner, and that just works. If you have a multi-screen setup, you get some weirdness, and I'm experimenting.
Or a virtual machine in my case. I'm running Server 8 on virtual machines, and it's always like, come on.
No. So my recommendation.
It's made me a big PowerShell guy, though.
Well,
I just leave the PowerShell prompt open and I just do everything.
Or a keyboard shortcut person, right? Because all of those things have keyboard shortcuts associated with them as well. And I give them some credit for kind of covering the bases in that way.
Here's the funny thing, though. So again, they wanted to ship Vista in time for Christmas. Sinofsky and his team wants to ship Windows 8, but the interesting thing is they're shipping another Vista. They're shipping another product that has some fantastic technological stuff. And when we're talking about Windows 10 5 years from now, all the stuff that people love will have appeared in Windows 8. But I wonder, will he actually be Olchining himself? That's a new verb.
Yeah, it's possible. It might happen a little more quickly in his case. The problem is that the stuff they're shipping now is all very surface level. You know, it's a brand new UI, it's a brand new runtime, it's brand new apps, it's brand new everything. Right. And I think this scares people. You know, the reaction that we've seen to this is incredible. You know, people are freaking out. People, it's funny to me too, power users, right? You know, these walking down the hall, tall and proud, and then they move shutdown. You know, I mean, all of a sudden you just see them wither and fall like babies. You know, and it's
which is odd because for years we've been bitching about the fact that you have to click start to stop the computer.
Exactly. Could somebody celebrate that that's not there anymore? No. You know, people complain. So part of it is pragmatic.
I want to take issue with that. The overuse of celebrate in America. Okay. If there isn't a party, nobody gets a day off. This is not celebrating.
Well, it's 15 years of shutting down through the start menu maybe does deserve it.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. And speaking of which, by the way, the new Metro Mango multi-server manager. Mm-hmm. I know you're more of a desktop guy than a server guy, but the fact that they tried to Metroize a window app, it looks like Windows 1.
It does.
This is the most two-dimensional window I have seen since 1984.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yes, it's true.
In fact, it makes you think there's something wrong with your monitor.
Right.
Is the R and the G not working? Because I only see B. You know,
it's not just that.
Yeah.
It's like I was doing a Windows 8 class yesterday, and I was showing that I think on IPAM, which is one of the products.
Yep.
I always, whenever I'm running server, again, I love Server 8. There's lots of great technologies. Microsoft has outdone themselves. They surprised the hell out of me with all the stuff there.
Yeah.
But the server manager interface, and it's always like this. We're always here talking about server, and so it's like, what's with the server manager guy? Do they hire from like the shallow end?
But it's so central to the product. That's what's amazing about it. You know
what? It's making me a PowerShell guy. I've always been a command line guy. It's just pushing me to more of a PowerShell guy.
That may have been the point, right? I mean, they're pushing PowerShell.
Here's the problem. Whenever you're running server manager, don't you want to go for the contrast dial on your monitor?
There
isn't one anymore.
Every time. I pray for color of any kind, even a red alert, just to give me that little burst of color.
Which is weird, right? Because when the little boxes come up in red, you're like, that just looks so. Because the rest of it all looks like you've got a designer housemaid or something like that.
It's getting better, but I think Server Manager is a great example of this. I would say the Metro apps on Windows 8 are an example of this, where we're seeing that 1.0 release now, and like you said, 2 versions down the road, this is going to be beautiful. You know, they'll have figured out multi-monitor in a way that makes sense with Metro apps. They'll make these things multitask better. They'll do all that stuff. Server Manager might have some color. You know, so
you know what this has taught me though? This has taught me to stop predicting things. I'll tell you why. So remember in Windows 95, you click the start button, like a little start menu comes up. Mm-hmm. 98, a little button comes up. And then Windows 2000, a slightly bigger one came out. And XP is like, and it kind of spans out. And my joke in 2001 was, 10 years from now, with Windows, when you click the start menu, it'll be the entire desktop. And everyone laughed, and it happened.
Yes.
It happened. My other one was that when Office 365 came out last year, in 2011, I said, 365, what about next year with the leap year? Does that mean it won't run on February 29th? It actually happened. And the guy at Microsoft was like, you did this.
Mark, I know you've heard this before, but you need to learn how to shut your mouth.
I don't think it's going to take, Paul. I don't think it's going to take.
So what do you think, though? I mean,
I'm just saying that I think that Windows Desktop 8. First of all, so what is Desktop 8's job? Its job is to challenge this thing,
right?
Because, and I think we've talked about this before, but I had this chill down my back about a year and a half ago. I got my iPad. I'm going away for the weekend to just do something, and I didn't bring my laptop, and I brought the iPad. And when I got on the plane and realized that, I was like, oh, this is a problem.
Yeah.
What it means is potentially, this could be amazing. People could stop buying, consumers could stop buying Windows desktops altogether.
Yep.
I don't think that I'm going too far in saying that. That's A. B is, what's the other thing Microsoft's pushing? The cloud. How do we get to the cloud? Oh, that's right, through the browser. Well, the thing is, if you're building a cloud and it is not browser agnostic, nobody's going to use it. I say that, but of course Windows 365 doesn't run on Safari worth crap. But eventually, in order for it to be successful.
Sure.
So what that means is I don't need a Windows box. And I wonder if Windows Desktop, do you think Windows Desktop is an endangered species?
I think it is for consumers, yeah. I think that's where this is splitting. I find it odd that they put both of these products into one thing, because in some ways they're kind of like 2 different things.
It's absolutely true.
But that Metro stuff is the answer for the iPad.
Absolutely.
And then of course the desktop just evolves. I think it was Steve Jobs who talked about cars and trucks, that these things are cars and PCs are trucks. We'll always need trucks, but it will no longer be the biggest part of what we think of as the general purpose computing market.
Right.
It'll be the minority. After tablets and other hybrid type devices and smartphones.
Well, then plus once we get the Google glasses, it'll just be a question of putting some little things on and typing into the air. That'll be fun. Since Bluetooth made it possible for people to, now it's okay to walk down the street talking to yourself.
Exactly.
It's something you would have done before. That could be,
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah, I don't, my mother, my brother, the normal people I know who aren't in the industry don't need the complexity of a Windows computer. As recently as this last weekend, we had dinner with some people, and the woman was saying, my computer won't start, and I was going to do this and that. And I've restored it in the past, and this time it didn't work. And you're listening to a story like, this is horrific. It reminds me of when people used to have to know how to fix a car to drive one. It's just too much.
It's absolutely true.
And you see stuff in Windows 8 where it repairs better and much more quickly. That stuff is actually very neat. It's very forward-leaning. It doesn't apply to the desktop, which I think is very relevant to that discussion. But I think desktop evolves, and the Metro stuff is a revolution. We'll see.
I think part of that comes from something that I wrote a book about in 1999, where I talked about the fact that compared to any other product, software is so much lower quality than anything else. I mean, imagine you buy a toaster and it shocks you every 16 times.
Sure.
The 16th
never
time.
would accept this.
If McDonald's were run like a software company, one out of every 5 Big Macs would give you food poisoning, and their answer would be, "We're sorry, here's a coupon for 2 more." If you read a newspaper,
well, actually, the answer would be, "Sorry, you signed the EULA," and
pretty much. It's like opening up the newspaper, reading the sports page first, and it explodes. It's insane stuff.
Sure.
And what I argued at the time was that what people don't realize is that software vendors can spend more time fixing bugs and less time adding features. But they say consumers will never buy it. So the interesting thing is, I think if you said to a consumer, would you want the mil-spec version of Windows that's $50 more and it never crashes, and same for Office, but no new features? I actually got to interview Gates about this a long time ago, and I said, what if the next version, I said, here's an extreme example, because he was making believe he didn't understand. Bill's a smart guy, I'm sure he understood. And I said, let's imagine the next version of Office has no new features, but not a single bug. And his answer was classic Bill. It was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. No one would buy that.
That's funny, because the next new version of Office actually had no new features, but it had plenty of bugs.
I could still use Word 95 and be perfectly happy with it. I still don't understand why they rev Office, Although I can't wait for Metro Office. Couldn't. And what about the ARM tablet stuff? We'll be talking about this tomorrow at some great length. But the idea so ARM tablet makes some sense. I mean, it means you can have something that almost competes with this in terms of cost and weight and battery life.
Yep.
But they're going to come out with a version of Windows that only runs the so-called WinRT, or the Metro apps. I can live with that.
Well, it will have a desktop. It just won't have compatibility with desktop apps, which is kind of an awesome, no compromises design when you think about it. You ever use a product like Windows Media Center, for example? If you connect this onto your TV, you can use a remote, but every once in a while, a dialog box.
It reminds you that it's Windows.
Yeah. It's not its own thing.
It's
a thing on a thing. And unfortunately, that's the weirdness, I think, to Windows 8 and to WOA, where on a tablet, primarily you're working in that Metro environment. And it's fun and it's pretty and everything, but that stuff's it's in there. It's powerful. It's nice to have, maybe, and we'll see how people react to that. But it still is that dual-headed Hydra, is how I think of it. It's unclear right now.
So compare this to a Mac. All right, they're both running some version of iOS, of OS 10, something along those lines. And what do you do with this? There are very few actual standalone apps. Angry Birds is a standalone app. No, I'm serious.
All right.
9/10 of the apps I buy on an iPad are essentially glorified browsers.
Consumption apps. I think this is literally and
consumption apps.
Yeah.
What does tuberculosis have to do with it?
No. I mean, in other words, they're not creation apps. You're not using them to create content necessarily. Obviously, you can send emails and do things like that. But by and large, this thing is for consuming content, watching movies, reading.
It's a
book.
connector to the internet.
Yes.
It's a wireless way to get to content on the internet.
Yeah, you can tap out emails, and someone will someday write a book on that glass keyboard, and God love them for that. But by and large, people aren't going to do that kind of thing on that device. But on a Windows PC or a Mac, when you have the keyboard and all the power and the connectivity with devices and all that stuff, and all the complexity that comes with it.
You can write code, make a spreadsheet, do stuff like that.
Photoshop, whatever. And so I think that's the split. I think the benefit of Windows 8 maybe is that it offers both. That you have that, because we're not pure consumers or pure IT workers. We could be on a plane watching a movie and say, oh, I got to finish up that spreadsheet, and get in there and make it happen.
No, and basically that is the case, is that when you think about what a desktop does, when you think about what a tablet does, in the analysis, most people just need what the tablet's going to have, and that's going to be the.
I think so.
That's the job for them. I mean, this is the. It's funny, like when I'm anywhere, I have this thing with me. People say, you always use that iPad. I always have my books nearby. I always have my newspapers nearby.
Yes, exactly.
If necessary, there's a movie, et cetera.
Yeah,
et cetera,
all my
et cetera.
my magazine subscriptions have all switched over.
The
to
answer
Kindle
to every
and iPad.
question
My
on the
books
internet
are-
is out.
yes,
Precisely.
Yeah, and I hope someday that there's a Windows 8 tablet that looks just like that and has all those features.
But again, that's the funny thing. You were starting to say that is that as we talk in, what is this, March of 2012, XP was shipped in 2001. That's what most of the world is still using.
Right.
People are barely going to Windows 7. Why is Microsoft scrambling to get Windows 8 out? And the answer is, it's really, if you think about it, it's Windows Tablet Edition, the next.
The next, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't let this thing have another holiday season by itself, right? I mean, the competition, such as it is, has not risen to the challenge. Nobody wants to spend as much money as they would on an iPad and get something that's not an iPad today. And so I think the one thing that Windows 8 will have going for it is that dual nature that is sort of a problem as well, but that's historically been an issue for Windows always. Pro and con are kind of the same thing.
Here's the problem. I can give this to an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And the 8-year-old can figure this out pretty quickly, and then explain it to me. Whereas all that stuff about charms and everything, and I mean, we both have those build tablets, and it's just, first of all, they're monstrous.
It's not discoverable.
That's a good word, I like that.
It's not intuitive.
GUIs are intuitive when someone explains them to you.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Although, this thing is so simple. I mean, you're presented with a grid of 12 icons. I mean, this one looks pretty. Let's see what this does. It's not that
well,
hard.
no, at least it doesn't do the ADD icon thing that
Yeah.
Windows Phone Mango does and that Windows 8 can do.
I was going to say, get ready for that. I actually have gone in and turned off a lot of that stuff because when I leave it on the start screen, I feel like, am I having a stroke? What is happening here? It's like all this stuff, I mean,
it is absolutely true.
It's well-intentioned.
Have you read, was it Nick Carr's book, The Shallows?
Yes.
I mean, it's like this ADD machine that actually makes life worse.
That may sell it for younger people, by the way. I mean, we're both up there.
The Riddle in iPad, is that what it is?
Absolutely.
The Riddle in Windows.
It's just like an iPad, except it's really busy. Some people may like that. Don't discount that. But I mean, for me, there's a line that gets crossed.
But again, let's get back to the ARM for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So I had not actually played with a Windows Phone. But I was hanging with my friend Chris Anderson. She's one of the 5 of you that have Windows phones.
Yikes.
And it's cool.
It is.
I mean, Microsoft guys like to say something's fast and fluid.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Windows 8 is not fast and fluid. It's not fair of me to say that because we're only looking at the second beta at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I mean, if it actually gets as responsive as a Windows Phone, which brings me back to, why the heck don't we just put Mango on an ARM tablet?
This is the debate, right? And we
It's
know
insane.
that this is the debate that occurred within Microsoft. We know that certain people won and certain people lost. And
Yeah.
we're not getting that. But I can tell you, right now, on the cusp of Windows 8 happening, I still wish they had done that.
Absolutely.
I sort of accept that it probably wouldn't have been successful, right? Because they haven't been successful with these things. They did Zune, which was essentially a precursor of this user interface, and it went nowhere. But yeah,
I have to disagree, and here's why. Anyone who picks up a Windows Mango phone is like, this is freaking awesome. I want one of these.
Sure.
Oh, I can only get an AT&T? Never mind.
Well, so Windows 8, I mean, I think that one of the nice benefits to it is when you see these things in the store, I think, with all the tablets, very colorful displays. It's going to be very nicely differentiated from an iPad. You look at Android tablets, they just sort of look like iPads, sort of, Whereas I think Windows 8 tablets, I think they're going to be differentiated, and I think they're going to
Android has the Linux problem.
Yeah.
It's technologically it does everything, but the icons look a little weird and the colors are off, and it's kind of like somebody designed it with their left hand and they're right-handed,
Yeah.
With all the GUI stuff. And I mean it with no disrespect to Linux guys. I think what the open source community does is absolutely astounding.
I know. I've been tossing some disrespect there. Actually, it's badly designed. It just is. I mean, this is what happens when a product comes out of an engineering community. It just is. It's badly designed. This thing is very nicely designed. It clearly design was first on the iPad.
Right.
Clearly design was last on Android, and then Windows as always. And it was so
Somewhere
weird.
in
It's
between.
right in the middle.
Somewhere in between.
It really
is. Exactly. But here's the other thing about ARM that I can't understand. Is that they announced they're going to do ARM tablets because they've been sort of dithering about it. Remember, I don't know if you recall this, but in September we were trying to nail them down on, is there going to be ARM? Is server going to be on ARM? And then, well, maybe yes, maybe no. Well, what do you think? No, you know because you work for Microsoft and I don't. I'm just a journalist. No. Wasn't that fun? Windows Voldemort, the Windows that can't be spoken of. So, but they said that you won't be able to join it to a domain. Now, I know that there's a conversation going on there that I haven't heard yet.
Right.
But the idea was like, and the Microsoft guys...
I think this is a huge mistake.
Well, you know what? I'm going to be the positive guy this one.
Well, okay. So would you argue that is it because of the fear of backwards compatibility issues would be the problem? In other words, without domain support, what you're basically getting is an Exchange Active Sync device, just like a smartphone. And so there's a certain level of manageability there, whatever.
Which I like. It'd be nice to know that I could brick my iPad from my Exchange server.
Oh,
you'll
totally be able to do that. So,
no, I'm serious. It's an Exchange 2003 SP1 feature where if I lose my smartphone, we can brick it.
That is a feature of Exchange Active Sync that works on an iPad.
Absolutely.
And it will work on a mobile tablet.
Absolutely.
Obviously, Windows PCs are the most highly managed devices on Earth. IT organizations get them. They love them for that. They know how to make it work.
Love group policies.
Yes, and adding that to WoWo would have been so obvious, and I think would have really pushed that platform. But I think what they're doing is saying, look, consumers, business people, devices are for consumers, PCs are for business.
I guess I don't know why they think that if you want 8 hours of battery life, then you must be a consumer and not a business person. That seems a little crazy to me. But let me do the positive spin on that. Mm-hmm. Positive spin on that is maybe we should get away from the idea of domain joining. Maybe the idea, this very, very hard switch about I'm in the domain, I'm not in the domain. What if we got a little better with certificates?
Mark, we're like mind melding right now. Because actually, I almost wrote that very editorial this week where the notion...
Did you not read my column last month? You never read my stuff.
Do you still write a column? No, so I'm sorry.
I have to come up with 12 opinions a year, which is difficult for me.
Because you have like 29 of them easily in a given year.
No, but my argument was, if we get better...
What you're saying right now is genius because I think... Because I almost feel like we've...
Let's not raise the bridge, let's lower the river on this one.
Yes. I mean, I really do think that the barrier to entry, and not just price, but the technological challenge, the complexity of it, to a truly useful managed environment is just too high for these small businesses. And in the same way that people are buying iPads and Macs, people are using Google services and Google's cloud services that are for small businesses. And that's what they're getting used to. And as they go into the workplace, they are expecting that feature set.
Right.
And I think Microsoft's maybe not seeing the forest for the trees.
Let me set things up so that I can put a cert on this.
Yeah.
And we kind of like have domain membership light in the sense that I'm now a trusted member. I can use a domain controller to do authentication, which I'm going to do all the time, by the way. Once you give me access to that, direct access kind of does this, right? Direct access was sort of a step in the right direction. It'll affect you have to be domain joined.
Are you familiar with Windows Intune?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't mean to ask that condescendingly. Mark, perhaps you've not heard of it.
Oh, no. I just don't get what Windows Intune's all about. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Well, it is a cloud-based PC and eventually device management service.
I've seen the PowerPoint also.
But that is sort of what we're talking about. In other words, Microsoft offers, obviously, certain features through Active Directory. They have the System Center series of products for managing things at a very fine-grained level. But that's a lot of complexity and cost right there inside of an organization. I think for smaller businesses or faster-moving, lighter businesses, however you want to say it, the cloud service where you're kind of paying a subscription fee makes a lot of sense. And I actually could very well answer that question we have about these WoWo tablets. And maybe that's the way those things can be managed. Because Intune operates outside of Active Directory.
Right.
Which was kind of a bold move for Microsoft to make, given that their entire infrastructure is based on Active
They don't have a version of AD that works in the cloud yet. That's the problem.
Right, but this is kind of a weird thing to say as a Microsoft guy. I kind of hope they never do.
I was going to say something, but I realized I'm under NDA.
All right, so
let's move along.
Okay, so they probably will, but the point is that one of the things I actually do like about Intune quite a bit is that it is outside of AD. Group policies have are a convoluted hierarchy of things, and you have to run tests against them to see that you didn't, blow away something by doing something up here. And the nice thing about the policies...
That's only because there's no centralized field marshal for group policies. I mean,
it's like spaghetti on a wall. It builds up.
It's up to the product group.
Yeah.
Whereas in the PowerShell, what Snover and his guys have done is just absolute genius. In that, that they have kind of a half a hand on people when they're, like, for example,
and you need that for something, especially this complex.
If you want to keep the verbs down to a small number, which is a very important thing to make PowerShell continue to be useful, if you want to keep the help to the quality that it is, that may be the best help I've seen in a software product in a very long time.
Interesting.
I mean, it's those guys, whipping people that are not excellent.
All right, well, you should look into Intune. It's interesting because it has a flat policy model. It will respect Active Directory policies. Those will take precedent. It understands that people will mix and match.
So it can manage AD attached devices as well.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, no. Actually, maybe that's not the right way to say it. No. It can interact with AD, and it can in the case of PCs, it's PCs today. It can do that kind of thing. The point is, a lot of people have devices. I keep saying devices, PCs really, that exist outside the corporate network, and maybe are never going to come into that network, or are only rarely going to do so. And you want some way to push software updates or whatever it is down to those PCs.
And this is just Windows devices. It won't do smartphone. It won't do like Windows Phone.
Well, no,
management.
it's heading to that. So I think Windows Phone, and I would assume Woe as well, next version, yeah. And I think that maybe that's the answer. In other words, we're not going to have Active Directory support, but that's okay because we have this Intune thing that allows you to manage these things outside of Active Directory.
So we're announcing right here today that Windows 9 will actually offer the non-Active Directory version of AD.
I feel like what I'm announcing is a supposition based on other things that I know, and it's like as we were talking, I almost put it all together.
Well, so if you stop.
I need to leave and write. That's interesting.
You should read my column. We've been talking about this for a while, buddy. But I mean, if you think about it, it's kind of like the firewall story, in the sense that perimeter firewalls made sense 15 years ago because everybody went to work, and everybody sat on their desktop computer that they didn't move around with. Well, things change. Laptops become reasonable. People are working from home. All of a sudden, a perimeter firewall seems like a stupid idea. It's security theater.
Right.
So in the same way, AD made sense in 1993. Everybody goes to work. It's not a big problem to deal with actually running this stuff over the internet.
Because you work here at this place, right, on this device.
Exactly.
It's not the way the world works anymore.
So we'll see. Maybe that's the answer.
I think that is the answer.
I think that is the answer. All right.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Sir, always good.
Thanks,
we should
man.
do this again. Let's do it tomorrow.
Sounds great, like a great idea. That would be live, but if you're watching this, you missed it. Sorry.
We'll probably record it.
Oh, I hope not.